So yes, I am the other side of the Havas sandwich. I am from the creative agency, so from Havas WorldWide, and I run the planning department, so we are the strategy behind brand campaigns. I'm also sort of completely left of field in this conversation because I think the first time I talked about anything having to do with this was a couple weeks ago when a company that I use for some research called Relative Insights asked me to speak at Social Media Week. I was a last minute fill-in and I got to talk on a panel about brands and how they talk to women. And so it was the first time I'd ever thought of it before. I'd never given it any thought. And then I found myself being really contrary about the conversation because it was about the sort of language you should use to talk to women. And that brands should adopt a female vocabulary. And I took issue with that because of what I think the stereotypes are of what those words would be about how you describe them. So my guess is funny would never be a word to describe women, and that is what I take issue with. The guy who is running the panel and who owns this company, and they are amazing by the way, but he was saying he analyzes people's Twitter feeds and tells them whether they are masculine or feminine. And he said he had a conversation with a woman and said, your Twitter feed and your conversation is very masculine. And the reason for that was because she cursed and used caps or something. I curse a lot, and I use caps from time to time. So that's the thing I was sort of taking issue with. But I guess the other side of it is I think advertising should be held more accountable for the messages we put out there. And so I do think it is in fact a necessity that we talk about it. And one of the things I said on that panel is that let's not kid ourselves, femvertising isn't an act of charity, it's an act of commercial gain. I work on Durex quite a lot, and sex used to be the thing that sold products, and at the moment it feels like feminism is that thing. And it's been true for hundreds of years. It was always there to ignite women's passions and get them out there buying the products that you want them to. So there's a guy called Edward Bernays who is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he, some people believe, was the original founder of PR. Although at the time he called it engineering consent, which sounds really scary. But he was the first one to theorize the idea that you can get someone to want things they don't need by tapping into subconscious desires like freedom and success. And so he was called upon by the American Tobacco Company to get women to smoke cigarettes, because at the time it was only acceptable for men to do it publicly. And he staged the first PR thing, which was that parade on Easter in New York City. And he called the press and said, watch out for all these women who are going to be standing up to men to fight for their equality by smoking torches of freedom. That was literally the language that he used. And obviously it was so successful, and all these women started going out and smoking cigarettes publicly and buying way more cigarettes, that the companies started doing ads, traditional ads about it. So this woman believes in herself enough to smoke cigarettes, and I love the sort of advertising equation that there's the hierarchy of believe in yourself and what that does for your self-esteem, but at the same time there's the don't test one brand alone, compare them all, because there's got to be a hard sell message in there as well. And then of course the conversation has evolved. It's not quite that obvious, but in some ways maybe more manipulative in that way because it's much more subtle. This was, so the original Dove campaign for Real Beauty launched in 2006, which is almost 10 years ago. It's amazing how long they've kept up with it. It does stand as testament to the campaign. And actually the original ad, which was called Evolution, it was a viral before viral was a thing, because YouTube launched the year before. But it really tapped into something that was so true to women, that's what made it such a success, and it is still to this day. And yes, I agree. I don't think it has done enough to change what it means to feel beautiful and what it is to be beautiful in women's eyes. And I think in some ways it's challenging some of our self-esteem in and of itself, because you're asking people to make a decision between pretty and average in the current work. But the theme of empowerment is one that we've actually been living with for a while. Nike in the 90s released this ad with Marilyn Monroe. I don't know if you remember or have seen it, but it's essentially the same idea that we're talking about today about female empowerment. The ad was called Statistics Lie, and it's about how women shouldn't be judged by the things they can't control. So the things that are just our outward appearance, that we should be judged by the things that we are on the inside. And so if she's measured, let her be measured by who she is, not what she looks like. This was the 90s, so comparing it to Dove Evolution, the 90s version of that was Oprah read it out loud on one of her shows and cried, which was the 90s version of a YouTube viral, because that's the thing that most spread. This Girl Can is today's version of the empowerment theme, and again, it is a noble cause. Women should be more comfortable to enter the space of sports and be more athletic and feel like they can do stuff like that. And Under Armour, sure, they do it too, and they talk about I will what I want, and that you shouldn't accept rejection, that you should fight for the things you want to do. Like a Girl, there again with the empowerment theme, and clearly it's a trend, because every brand at the moment is tapping into the empowerment theme, and the skeptic in me goes, yeah, I've kind of had enough of empowerment. And in some ways, because we see this stuff all the time, and I live in the world where we look at advertising constantly, I can't tell the difference between them anymore. And that's what I take issue with, is that there's just a blanket theme that runs through the work, and of course there's commercial gain behind it. And so I personally start to get a little bit skeptical. But that said, the positive side of advertising is that it can be a really powerful force of good. It can be an educational system, because we don't just sell products, we sell sets of values, we sell concepts about what it means to feel free or successful or liberated. And so in the version of advertising which is just about the more you see of it, the more familiar it becomes, the more you accept it, I think maybe we shouldn't be so skeptical of all the empowerment themes. And actually we do have quite a lot to make up for in our history, in that there is just as much of this horrible bile being put out there in the past. And these are real. This is when smoking was still targeted to men, and if you blow it in her face, she'll follow you anywhere. But these are real ads, and yes, they're from a long time ago, but these are current ones. And no, they're not the Beachbody one that got slammed in social media, but this is still happening, and it's just people aren't that interested, and they take it for granted, the fact that Burger King thinks that's okay, or that Mr. Clean, obviously the most important thing in her world is cleaning the toilet, as her daughter looks on inspiringly at her mom's job in the bathroom. And that's still happening, and not enough people are sort of fighting back against that. The good news is social media. The good news is that when things get noticed, social media is there to uncover these signs of misogyny that used to happen in small little pockets but then fizzle out. Now are happening on a slightly grander scale. And the reason for that is because we, the people, are the juries and the judges, and we get to right wrongs. We get to right wrongs about advertising, we get to right wrongs about stuff that's going on in the real world. But women and men especially have the power to do this, to raise these issues and lead the debates. When I was looking at work on this subject before the panel that I did, I was I felt like I was being haunted by these idents that come on all the time on whatever it is channel that I'm watching. It's for Diet Coke, and it's called spontaneous moments or something, impulsive moments. So I looked it up because it was so terrible. In one of them, which is the ad at the top, a woman gets a run in her stocking, and she's obviously horrified. But her friends, in a sign of solidarity, rip their stockings as well. And I wasn't sure why they were doing that, if it was a fashion statement thing or a kind of you go girl rebellion. I definitely have no idea what it has to do with low-calorie soda. But so I looked it up to see what they were trying to do, and so they've coined a kind of target description, which we love to do, especially in planning. So they've given their target a name, which is the Impulsista. And it's a woman who's sort of spontaneous and playful, all the female words that brands should use to describe their target. So she's playful and spontaneous and fun and flirty. I think one of the lines says she's a glorious work in progress, which is so cringy. But actually, I think what they were trying to do is encourage people to take risks. It's just the execution of that couldn't be worse. The good news is that I also subsequently looked it up to see what people were saying about it, and people obviously all share the same perspective on it, that it is awful. And of course there are men commenting on it as well. They are terrible, and that's the stuff that we're allowed to sort of fight against. But it's not just about that. It's not just about calling out Diet Coke for being horrible. Liza Donnelly is an awesome cartoonist for The New Yorker, and she talks about feminism and humor quite a lot, and that's what she uses as her weapon, because that's what she's really good at. So it's about women and empowerment, but she talks about how we now have the power to start revolutions. And from a Havas perspective, we talk about this stat a lot because we do something called the Meaningful Brand Study, and we ask people questions about brands. And when we present this in pitches to clients, we say, isn't this horrible and scary? Because most people don't care about your brand. Most people don't care about most brands. And people should be shocked and horrified by this number. I don't actually find that number that alarming or unbelievable, because outside of our world, who does care about brands? No one. But what I find more interesting about this statistic is what sits underneath it, which is that, sure, people don't care if brands disappeared, but 69% of people say that they expect brands to do more. They expect brands to make a tangible difference in their lives, to stand for something, to make a difference, which that's what I find interesting, is that we don't care about brands, and yet we expect quite a lot of them, and not many brands are doing anything about it. When we try to get consumers to do something, to change their behavior, we look at a behavior framework model, and this is a pretty basic one. But you can sort of apply it to how we are changing the conversation about women and advertising in general, in that as brands and advertisers, we're very good at the seeing it. We spot trends. That's what we do for a living. We talk about what's cool, what's in and what's out, what's fashionable, and how we can get in on it in a sort of herd mentality kind of way. We're really good at that. We're even good at personalizing it and making it feel relevant and useful to me. I get it. I see how that works. I see how that works for my brand. I spot the trend. I want to apply it to something I can do something with as a brand. We're even good about talking about the benefits of that. I can rationally understand what the benefit is, what the commercial benefit is, what the social benefit is. I get that. We're very bad at the do, even though that should be the most self-explanatory part of the consumer behavior change model. We don't do enough. We do a lot of talking. We don't do enough to physically, tangibly, in the real world, make a difference. What I don't know about all the campaigns that have been massively awarded from a creative perspective is what they're actually doing to perception. I don't know what their results will be, and I hope they'll be successful, but because I don't see them tangibly making a difference in the world, I do question it a little bit. Of course, it is happening somewhat, and I think this is the time to do more of it. We talked about Nike before doing the kind of static print ad with Marilyn Monroe on it with a point of view. But Nike is progressive enough to have taken that a step further. So it's not just about their point of view. They have systems in place. They have sustainable programs in place to make tangible differences. So the Nike Foundation exists. This is Yelena, which is the program in Ethiopia. It's essentially a soap opera about 4 girls, but it reteaches the values that they want to impart to people in Ethiopia about how girls should be treated, how girls should think of themselves, and how they should be accepted in culture. And the results of that aren't just creative awards, they are awards to say that they've made a real difference, because everyone who listens to the radio show, so all listeners, now think differently about girls' issues, 65% of those people. I think when we talk about a certain category, and if it is about targeting to women, it is helpful to look outside our sphere, our world of reference. And when I was thinking about it the first time around, I kind of wondered what brands have changed the game fundamentally that we can learn from. And the one I was thinking about was Airbnb, because they had a huge hurdle, which was that they didn't change travel. That's what they say in their kind of marketing reports and stuff. They changed the face of travel. But what they did was they changed how we understood their relationship with strangers and issues of trust, which strangers, they've had a worse rap than women. We're taught instinctively never to trust people, never to trust strangers, and now we're letting them into our homes, and that's normal. That's super interesting, and I don't think that is just a series of campaigns or a point of view. I think that's part of their business model and how they do things differently. So when we talk about this subject, I think we want to challenge outdated rules and raise some eyebrows and be controversial, but at the same time, the most important thing underneath it is just to make a meaningful difference.